Runaway bride got in the wrong carriage at Christmas, and the Duke's mother immediately had a plan. My son needs a wife. Snow carried the weight of silence over London that Christmas Eve, drifting in pale sheets across the cobblestones as if the heavens themselves wished to muffle the world's cruelties. Lanterns swayed before the bustling coaching inn, casting trembling halos of gold across the crowd, but she, shivering, breathless, veil torn, felt only darkness. The runaway bride pushed through the throng with the frantic dignity of someone who knew shame was already galloping behind her. Her satin hem, once pure ivory, trailed streaks of slush and soot, but she did not pause to gather it. She could not. Every footstep she heard felt like pursuit. Every whisper felt like a verdict. And every flicker of light reflected her own trembling reflection back at her, an unwed bride who had fled her wedding before the vows, before the chains could be locked, before her future was signed away to a man old enough to have dandled her mother on his knee. She heard the murmurs first, sharp as sleet. "Did you hear?" She ran from the altar. Her poor family, what disgrace! The industrialist will ruin them for this. The words clung to her, tearing small shreds of courage from her soul, but she forced herself to keep walking, breathing, staying upright. Shame would not claim her. Not tonight. Not when cold air tasted more like freedom than fear. She reached the back row of carriages, horses stamping clouds of steam into the frosted street, drivers shaking off snow from their cloaks. In that blur of movement and panic, she saw the door of a dark carriage swing open. A footman stepped aside, assuming the approaching figure was the Duchess returning from the inn. The runaway bride, seeing only refuge, gripped her cloak tighter, dipped her head low, and climbed inside without a thought, desperate to disappear before anyone recognized her. Inside, warmth met her like a soft gasp, a compartment draped in deep blue velvet, faintly perfumed, illuminated by a single carriage lamp. She blinked through the haze of her tears, realizing too late she was not alone. Opposite her sat a woman of serene command. Silver hair arranged beneath a fur-trimmed bonnet, posture elegant, gaze alert as if she had spent a lifetime seeing through every mask society dared present. The Dowager Duchess of Alsford regarded the trembling girl with a stillness that felt both piercing and unexpectedly gentle. "My dear child," the Duchess murmured, closing her book with a decisive yet unhurried motion, "you are shaking as though the wolves of Parliament are after you. Pray tell, what has frightened you so?" The words unraveled what strength the girl had left. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle the sob rising in her throat. A proper lady never wept before strangers, but propriety had been a cage, and tonight she had shattered it. Tears slid down her cheeks anyway, fragile as raindrops on glass. She whispered an apology, but her voice broke apart before the sentence ended. The Duchess observed her with a slow, assessing thoughtfulness. Not judgment. No, the runaway bride had endured enough of that. This was recognition. A measuring of pain. A weighing of wounds. The Duchess lifted her gloved hand and signaled to the footman outside. The door shut, the lamp swayed, and the carriage lurched into motion. "London is no place for a young lady to wander alone on a night like this," the Duchess said softly. "You will not be returning to that inn, I think." The girl startled, wiping her tears rapidly. Your Grace, I did not mean to intrude. I only sought to—" her words tangled again, brittle as ice. "Yes," the Duchess replied, voice lowering with understanding. "You sought escape." The runaway bride froze. The Duchess had spoken the truth so swiftly, so effortlessly, that for a heartbeat the world seemed to fall away. She trembled again, but this time, not from cold. "You need not fear," the Duchess continued. "Whatever storm hurled you into my carriage, you are safe now." The girl's breath hitched, a sound shaped by exhaustion and disbelief. "Your Grace, I do not wish to inconvenience you." "My dear child," the Duchess said, leaning forward with a warmth that felt almost maternal, "inconvenience is when Parliament misplaces a document. You, on the other hand, are simply a young lady in distress. I have never turned away one of those." Outside, hooves struck snow-covered stone in a rhythmic pulse, carrying them deeper into the blizzard. Each passing street blurred into the next, as though London itself wished to bury the runaway bride's past beneath its drifting white veil. The Duchess studied her face. The raw fear, the bruised dignity, the kind of beauty that was not merely physical but woven from gentleness, resilience, and something she recognized from her own youth, a refusal to be trapped. The girl looked young, heartbreakingly so, and yet her eyes held the ache of someone who had already seen too much of the world's darker hands. "You may tell me your story when you are ready," the Duchess said. "But know this, I do not tolerate cruelty toward women in my presence. If someone has wronged you, they will not reach you under my roof." "My roof?" the runaway echoed, startled. "Of course." A faint smile touched the Duchess's lips, a smile that held both intelligence and something dangerously close to delight. It would be most improper to deliver a trembling young lady back to the doorstep of humiliation. "I am taking you to Alsford House." The girl felt her breath catch at the name. Alsford House. A bastion of old nobility. A place whispered of at soirees and tea-tables. Why would the Duchess take her there? But before she could ask, the Duchess continued, "I believe in fate, my dear. I also believe in recognizing opportunity when it quite literally falls into one's carriage." The runaway blinked. "Opportunity, Your Grace?" "Oh yes," the Duchess said, amusement warming her voice now. "You see, my son, the Duke, is a man most determined never to wed. He has returned from the wars with a heart shuttered as firmly as the windows of a house abandoned. Yet he is young, he is lonely, and he requires a woman of gentleness, courage, and sincerity." The Duchess's gaze sharpened with unmistakable approval. "And you, my dear, appear to possess all three." The runaway bride felt color rise to her cheeks, disbelief warring with something she had not felt in weeks, hope. But before she could speak, the Duchess laid a reassuring hand on her gloved fingers. "Do not trouble yourself with fear tonight. You shall have a warm chamber, a meal, and rest. Tomorrow, when the snow settles, we shall speak of futures, not the wretched one you fled, but perhaps one you might one day choose." The girl's heartbeat fluttered like a trapped bird. Could such mercy be real? Could such a life, safe, distant from the man she had been forced to marry, truly exist? As the carriage turned toward the northern quarter, the city grew quieter, swallowed by snow. Lamps glimmered faintly behind frosted windows, their golden halos guiding the way like beacons of new beginnings. The runaway bride gazed out through the carriage glass, watching the world blur, melt, and reform. For the first time since she had fled the altar, she allowed herself to breathe, slowly, deeply, as though claiming oxygen was not a crime but a right. The Duchess watched her with quiet satisfaction. When the towering gates of Alsford House emerged from the storm, wrought iron glittering beneath the lantern-light, the Duchess leaned back with a serene expression. "My dear," she murmured, "welcome to the one home in England where your past cannot follow." And as the carriage rolled beneath the archway, the Duchess whispered, softly, triumphantly, entirely to herself, "My son needs a wife." The runaway bride did not hear the words. But fate did. Snow fell more heavily as the carriage crossed into the courtyard of Alsford House, the lamps along the grand portico burning like steadfast stars in the storm. The runaway bride stepped down with trembling caution, her borrowed courage slipping the moment her boots met the marble step. A footman opened a vast oak door, releasing a soft exhale of warmth scented with beeswax, pine resin, and winter roses. She hesitated at the threshold, half believing the Duchess might reconsider, might see her clearly now under the full glow of the vestibule lamps and realize she was not fit for the sanctuary of a noble home. But the Duchess simply offered her arm, steady and unyielding. "Come, my dear. A house should greet its guests properly." Inside, the walls rose like cathedral pillars, hung with portraits whose painted eyes followed newcomers with solemn curiosity. Firelight rippled across polished floors, illuminating a gilded staircase that swept upward like a frozen waterfall. Servants paused mid-task, their expressions flickering between politeness and barely contained intrigue. A lady arriving unannounced at midnight, dressed as a bride yet accompanied by no husband, was a story they would tell in whispers for years. The runaway bride lowered her gaze, gripping the edges of her ruined cloak. "Your Grace, perhaps this is a mistake." The Duchess's answer came with a hint of regal authority. "Mistakes are made by those who surrender. You, child, have merely begun." She gestured to a maid. "Prepare the rose chamber, and fetch broth, warm apple wine, and towels. The lady has been exposed to this storm far too long. The runaway bride inhaled sharply at the word lady. It felt like a borrowed gown, beautiful but not truly hers. As they walked through the stately corridor, the Duchess observed her again with that quiet, calculating empathy. "Tell me, my dear, how old are you?" 20, she replied softly. "Ah, the age when the world believes a woman is a ribbon to be tied wherever men please." The Duchess sighed, a sound tinged with weariness. "You are younger than my son was upon inheriting the dukedom. War had finished sculpting him before 20 ever could." The runaway bride dared a question. "Is he kind?" The Duchess's pause was deliberate. "He is good." "Which is rarer." A shadow of sorrow crossed her features. "But kindness is not always the tool he understands. War teaches other languages." Before she could ask more, the corridor opened into the grand drawing-room, where candles flickered in tall crystal sconces. And beside the hearth stood a figure who turned slowly at their entrance. A man broad-shouldered, coat still dusted with snow, dark hair slightly wind-tossed from the stables. His striking posture spoke of both nobility and fatigue, as though the world had rested on his shoulders for too long. His gaze scanned the newcomer not with rudeness, but with the alert caution of a soldier returned to a quieter land he no longer fully trusted. "Mother, you are home much later than expected," he said, voice deep and steady. "And you bring company." The runaway bride's breath hitched. This was the Duke of Alsford, the man the Duchess had called lonely, wounded, and impossibly resistant to marriage. He seemed every inch the figure whispered about in London parlors, yet nothing like the cold-hearted recluse she had imagined. There was melancholy in his eyes, yes, but also a startling gentleness beneath the reserve. The Duchess stepped forward with calm deliberation. "My son, this young lady requires shelter. She has suffered an ordeal this evening and will remain with us until she is well again." The Duke's gaze sharpened with concern rather than scandal, though he clearly detected something unusual in the situation. He bowed to the runaway bride with restrained courtesy. "You are welcome under my roof," he said. "I trust my mother has offered comfort." She managed a nod, though her voice wavered. "Your Grace, I am grateful. I did not intend to intrude." "You intrude far less," he said quietly, "than many who come by invitation." The Duchess watched the exchange with thinly veiled satisfaction, as though observing the first cautious strokes of a portrait she had long envisioned. A maid arrived to escort the runaway bride upstairs. As she curtsied, the girl felt the Duke's gaze follow her, not boldly, but with a sense of quiet evaluation, like a man trying to decipher a story written in trembling breaths and water-stained silk. Her chamber was warm, lit by a single hearth that glowed like a promise of safety. The maid removed her sodden cloak and presented a nightgown soft as clouds, then retreated with a respectful bow. Alone, the runaway bride approached the mirror. The woman reflected there appeared fragile, wind-scattered, hair undone from panic and snow, cheeks blotched from tears. Yet there was something else, something she had not seen earlier that night. A faint spark, a trace of defiance, a softness not yet extinguished. Downstairs, the Duchess sat by the fire while her son poured himself a measure of brandy. "Mother," he said at last, "tell me who she truly is." The Duchess folded her hands. "Something in her tremor tells me she is running from more than the cold." "And you brought her here," he said, though not accusingly. "I did." "To what end?" She met his gaze evenly. "To protect her, and perhaps to heal you." His brow furrowed. "Mother, I am old enough to admit what you will not," she murmured. "You need companionship. Someone unspoiled by society's performances. Someone sincere." He set the glass down harder than intended. "I have no intention of marrying." "Yes," she said, voice gentle but immovable. "You have repeated that refrain for years. But circumstances change. Hearts soften. And fate, my dear boy, does not care for your rehearsed refusals." He looked away, jaw tightening. Faint scars along his temple caught the firelight, reminders of battles he never spoke of. The Duchess softened her tone. I do not ask you to offer affection, only kindness. That girl carries wounds too fresh to name. Upstairs, the runaway bride could not sleep. The storm rattled the window panes like a restless spirit calling her name. She stepped toward the glass, staring at the courtyard gates now half buried in snow. If her pursuers came, the storm would hide their approach, or hide her escape. But she no longer wished to flee blindly. Safety was a fragile miracle. One must not abandon it too soon. A soft knock sounded. She startled, then pulled her shawl around her shoulders. Opening the door, she found the Duke standing in the dim hallway, more hesitant than she expected from a man of his stature. He bowed his head slightly. "Forgive the intrusion. I wished only to ensure you are settled." Her pulse quickened. "You are very kind, Your Grace." "Kindness," he replied with a quiet ache, "is easier to give to strangers than to oneself." Something in those words pierced her. He had battled ghosts long before hers brought her to his door. "You are safe here," he added, his voice steady as snowfall. "No one will question your presence. And no one will force you to return to what harmed you." The words nearly undid her. Her eyes shimmered. "I have not felt safe in a very long time." He inclined his head, and for the first time she saw the warmth beneath his reserve, a flicker of humanity struggling against the armor of a soldier who had survived too much. "Rest, then," he said. "This house will hold its peace for you." When he walked away, her heart thrummed with a sensation she barely recognized. Trust, fragile but real. The storm raged through the night, but by morning the house held an eager hush. Servants exchanged whispered theories. The Duchess concealed quiet triumph beneath polished propriety. And the Duke, though he told no one, found himself glancing toward the staircase more often than habit required. Something had shifted in Alsford House. Something delicate yet impossible to ignore. And when the runaway bride descended for breakfast, unaware of how many eyes followed her, the Duchess watched her son's expression soften just slightly, just enough, to confirm the seed she had planted had begun to root. Yet outside, far beyond the warm glow of Alesford's windows, someone else was searching the snow-covered roads for a missing bride. The storm had hidden her for one night. It would not hide her forever. Morning crept softly into Alesford House, brushing pale gold across the frost-kissed windows, but the runaway bride awoke with a heaviness she had not felt in the sanctuary of night. Safety, she realized, was not quiet. It echoed with questions she feared to answer. She descended the staircase with measured steps, conscious of the watching eyes of servants who tried to mask their curiosity behind polite bows. Yet beneath their composure lay whispers, gentle in tone, sharp in implication. A mysterious young woman arriving at midnight, clad in bridal silk, could not go unnoticed. She pressed her trembling hands together, hoping the warmth of the banister might still her fears. The Duchess awaited her in a sunlit drawing-room, dressed in pale lavender that softened her dignified features. She gestured for the girl to sit beside her near the fire. "You slept poorly," she observed gently. "Storms leave their mark upon more than the sky." The runaway bride hesitated. "I did not mean to trouble anyone with my presence." "You trouble no one," the Duchess assured her. Yet her eyes, sharp as a jeweler's lens, searched the young woman's face for truths unspoken. "But I sense your story is one that must be given breath before it crushes the chest that holds it." The girl swallowed hard, but before she could reply, the Duke entered the room. He paused upon seeing her, his expression unreadable yet undeniably softened by recognition. "Good morning," he said, and though the words were simple, they carried the weight of sincerity, a rarity in noble speech. She murmured her greeting, unable to ignore the way his presence steadied her, even as it stirred a fragile, unfamiliar warmth. The Duchess motioned for tea to be poured, then turned her gaze meaningfully toward her son. "My dear, do accompany our guest. She must not feel interrogated by an old woman alone." The girl flushed. "Your Grace, you have been nothing but kind. I fear you mistake my silence for reluctance." "Not reluctance," the Duchess corrected softly. "Protection." The Duke stepped closer, his voice low but anchored in quiet resolve. "If you wish to speak, we will listen. If you do not, then we shall wait." Something in the steadiness of his tone, unhurried, without demand, broke the fragile barrier within her. She clenched her hands, knuckles paling. "I fled because I was to be married," she whispered. "Not by choice, but by decree." The Duchess nodded slowly, confirming her suspicions. "Your family arranged it?" "Yes," the girl said, her breath uneven. "To a man nearly 3 times my age. Wealthy, influential, and cruel. He treated me not as a bride, but as an investment. When I begged my parents to reconsider, they said a dutiful daughter does not question what is best for her family." Emotion caught her voice, turning it thin as glass. "I realized that on my wedding day, no one would hear me if I cried. So I ran." Silence followed, thick with the weight of truth. The Duchess's eyes softened with fierce maternal protectiveness, the kind she rarely displayed publicly. "Then you have endured more than scandal," she said quietly. "You have endured betrayal." The Duke's expression darkened, a faint but unmistakable shadow crossing his gaze. Anger, not at her, but at the world that had cornered her. "You were right to flee," he said with conviction. "A woman must not be traded like a ledger's sum." Her throat tightened. No man had ever spoken of her freedom as though it were natural, rather than transgressive. The Duchess rose, smoothing her gown. "I must attend to correspondence. You two remain here. Continue this conversation if you wish. But remember, child, you are safe within these walls. No one may compel you back into chains." When she left, the girl found herself alone with the Duke in the quiet hum of the morning drawing-room. He did not move closer nor withdraw. He simply waited, a presence as steady as the hearth-fire. "Your mother is very perceptive," she murmured, attempting a small smile. He exhaled a breath that might have been a laugh, though it carried more melancholy than amusement. "She has spent a lifetime reading the sorrows others attempt to hide. I confess, I am far less skilled." "You seem quite skilled," she said softly. "You listen without pressing." "It is easier to listen," he replied, "when one has learned how silence can wound." She studied him, noting the faint scars near his temple, the posture of a man who stood as though ready to defend at any moment. "You have seen war," she said gently. "And war," he answered, "has seen me." For a heartbeat he looked away, jaw tightening. "I returned with promises unfulfilled, and one vow, that I would never ask another to share a life shadowed by memories I cannot bury." The tenderness in his voice unsettled her, not with fear, but with a delicate, dangerous longing. "Is that why you said you would never marry?" "It is part of it." He paused, searching for words that fit the gentleness he rarely displayed. "I believed myself incapable of offering peace to anyone. Yet—" his voice drifted, fragile at the edges. "When I found you in this house, I realized I envied your courage. You ran from imprisonment. I merely accepted mine." Her breath trembled in her chest. "You are not imprisoned." "No," he conceded. "But solitude can chain a man as surely as duty." Before she could reply, a footman hurried into the doorway, bowing deeply. "Your Grace, a rider has arrived at the gate. He demands audience." The Duke's posture shifted instantly, tension rippling through him like a drawn bowstring. "Who is he?" "He refused to give his name," the footman said, pale with unease. "But he carries papers bearing the seal of the Montfort Industrial Consortium." Color drained from the girl's face. That seal belonged to her former fiancé. The Duke's eyes flicked to her, protective, steady, unyielding. "You are not to approach the gate." She shook her head, panic rising. "He has come for me. He will not leave without me." "He will leave," the Duke said, cold certainty hardening his voice. "But he will leave without you." The footman bowed again and hurried away. The girl pressed a hand to her chest, trying to still her heartbeat. "You do not understand," she whispered. "He is powerful. He threatened my family. He will threaten you." The Duke stepped closer, not touching her, yet his presence alone felt like a vow. "Let him threaten. My mother invited you into this house under my protection. That is not a promise I will break." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the sudden, overwhelming relief of being defended without condition. "I do not wish to bring trouble upon you." "You have brought no trouble," he replied softly. "Only truth." She met his eyes, and the connection between them, quiet, fragile, undeniable, deepened in a way she could neither name nor escape. For all his guarded restraint, he radiated something she had never known, a man's loyalty offered freely, without expectation, without transaction. Voices rose faintly from the courtyard. Boots struck stone. The storm had cleared enough for confrontation. The Duchess re-entered the room, her expression sharpened with resolve. "He is a formidable man," she warned her son, "but bluster is a brittle weapon." The girl trembled. "He will insist upon taking me." The Duchess lifted her chin. "Then he will find that insistence is useless in a house ruled by principle." The Duke placed a reassuring hand over the girl's for the briefest moment, light as a promise, firm as a vow. "You will remain here," he said. "I will not allow him to claim what he has no right to." Outside, the courtyard doors opened, and a cold gust swept through the corridor as a furious male voice demanded entry. The Duke stepped toward the sound without hesitation. And though the girl's heart clenched with dread, the Duchess whispered beside her, "Do not fear, child. The moment my son stands between you and that man, the world will no longer resemble the one you fled." The voices outside grew louder, sharper, closer. The storm was no longer in the sky. It had come to Alsford House. The courtyard doors swung open with a force that sent a gust of icy wind spiraling through the corridor, extinguishing a nearby candle and making the runaway bride clutch the fabric at her throat. The Duchess steadied her with a touch as light as breath. "Remember, child," she murmured, "you are not alone here." But the reassurance trembled within the girl's chest, for the footsteps that entered were unmistakably purposeful, heavy, entitled, resonant with fury contained only by social decorum. The Duke stepped forward, posture straight as a drawn blade, meeting the intruder with a calmness sharpened by quiet warning. The man who entered was broad, richly dressed in wool and fur, his face flushed with cold and outrage. Recognition struck the girl like a shock of cold water. Her former fiancé, Mr. Harrowmont, whose voice had once carried promises gilded with lies. His gaze shot past the Duke and landed on her with a possessive triumph. "There you are." His words sliced through the hall. "Did you imagine you could run from me? From our agreement?" She trembled, stepping back instinctively, but the Duke shifted subtly, placing himself between them without touching her. "You will address no lady in this house with such tone," he said, voice low and controlled. Harrowmont scoffed, turning to him. "I address a woman who is legally bound to become my wife. She fled on her wedding day, a disgrace to my name, my family, and every investment made on her behalf. I have come to reclaim what is mine." The Duke's stillness darkened, a storm gathering beneath the surface. "A woman," he said coldly, "is not property to be reclaimed." Harrowmont's lips curled. "And you, Alsford, have no authority in matters that concern my household." "This is my household," the Duke replied. "And within these walls, my authority is absolute." The Duchess stepped forward with quiet, commanding grace. "Mr. Harrowmont, I suggest you temper your arrogance before you sink deeper into folly. Whatever arrangement you claim, this young lady is under my protection now." Harrowmont's gaze flicked between mother and son, irritation tightening his jaw. "Protection?" he spat. "What protection can she hope for here? Her family has renounced her. Society will ruin her. Only I can restore what she destroyed." The girl found her voice at last, though it wavered like candlelight in a draught. "I destroyed nothing. I saved myself." Harrowmont's eyes narrowed with dangerous contempt. "You saved nothing but scandal. Return with me now, and I may yet salvage your reputation." The Duke took a single step forward, and for the first time, Harrowmont faltered. The air seemed to thicken around them. "You will not speak another word that diminishes her," the Duke warned. "You will not threaten her. And you will leave this house." Harrowmont's temper flared. "You overstep, Alsford. I am here for what is rightfully mine." "She is not yours," the Duke said, voice resonant with a finality that echoed through the hall like a struck bell. The girl stared at the Duke's back, her breath catching. No one had ever defended her with such conviction. Not her parents, not the church elders, not a single so-called friend. And here stood a man who owed her nothing, who barely knew her, yet spoke as though her dignity were a treasure worth guarding. Harrowmont turned sharply toward her. "Tell him. Tell them all. You agreed to wed me." "I agreed under coercion," she whispered. "You threatened my family with ruin. Because they owed me." Harrowmont thundered. "Your father begged me to take you." "Enough." The Duchess's voice cracked like winter ice. "You have revealed more than enough of your character, sir." The Duke's gaze hardened. "Your dealings with her family have no bearing here. You will leave." Harrowmont laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "And if I refuse?" "Then," the Duke said quietly, "you will discover the extent of what I am willing to do." Something in the Duke's voice, its quiet ferocity, made Harrowmont hesitate. A man accustomed to power rarely encountered one with greater resolve. He drew himself upright. "Very well," he sneered. "If you intend to harbor a fugitive bride, know that you endanger your own reputation. You risk aligning your noble name with scandal." The Duke's expression did not waver. "I do not fear scandal. I fear only injustice. And I will not permit it under my roof." When Harrowmont turned toward the door, frustration stiffening his movements, the girl felt her knees weaken with relief. But he paused at the threshold, glaring back at her. "This is not over. When the courts open after Christmas, I will pursue my claim. You cannot hide behind charity forever." The Duke stepped forward again, voice cold as the snowstorm outside. "You may pursue whatever grievances you believe yourself entitled to. But know this, you will not see her again without her express consent. And I doubt you will ever receive it." Harrowmont's eyes blazed, but the Duke's unyielding stance left him no room for further theatrics. He flung the door wide, letting in a rush of winter wind before disappearing into the storm. The hall exhaled with sudden quiet. The Duchess lifted her chin, satisfaction tempered by concern. "My dear," she said to the girl, "sit. You are pale as marble." But the runaway bride remained standing, her gaze fixed on the Duke. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "There is no need," he replied gently. "I merely did what any man of conscience should." "Not any man," she said quietly. "Only you." His breath caught almost imperceptibly, as though her words had brushed against a wound he thought long numbed. The Duchess watched them with a knowing, softened expression. "Courage meets courage," she murmured, barely audible. "How rare a sight." The Duke turned toward his mother, as though aware of the silent judgment she wielded with the precision of a general. "I will escort her to the conservatory," he said. "She should not return to her chamber alone after such distress." The girl followed him through dimly lit corridors until they reached the glass-paneled conservatory. Snowflakes drifted against the glass like delicate, icy moths. Beneath the boughs of wintering plants, the Duke stopped and faced her. "You are not bound to obey him," he said, "nor chained to the future he attempted to force upon you." She felt tears gather, soft, fragile, born not of sorrow but of a dawning, overwhelming sense of freedom. "I believed no one would ever say those words to me," she confessed. "I believed I had no right to choose anything." He stepped closer, careful, deliberate, as though nearing something precious. "You have every right," he said. "And you have it now." She looked up at him, heart unsteady. "Why do you care so deeply for what happens to me?" His answer came after a long, weighted silence. "Because," he murmured, "I know what it is to be trapped by duty, to have one's life shaped by forces colder than any winter. And I would not see you swallowed by such darkness." She searched his face, its dignity, its sorrow, its unexpected gentleness, and understood with startling clarity that something had begun between them, something neither of them had invited yet neither wished to dismiss. The storm outside eased into soft, drifting flakes, the world hushed in white. The Duke lifted his gaze to the snow-covered sky beyond the glass. "Your life, your future, your heart, these belong to you alone." Then he looked back at her, voice deepening. "But should you choose to place any part of them here—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Her breath trembled. "I feel as though I am waking from a long, cold sleep." "And you are," he whispered. They stood together in the quiet conservatory, snow falling like blessings around them, each feeling the faint but undeniable pull of something irrevocably changing. And though neither spoke the words aloud, both understood. This was not simply sanctuary. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, and far more beautiful.